Hello boys, so I'm going to talk today about your booklet, your text types booklet which you should be able to have for this particular virtual class. So please make sure that you have it with you physically so we can study together, study all 16 text types that could enter in your paper 1 exam, which is based on writing. So far in our last 2 years of studying, we have been studying for this IB Paper 1 writing test. And for this particular test, what's really important is that you keep 5 things in mind when you have to tackle your task. This includes, number 1, does your chosen text type, the appropriate text type, have a title? Does it have a heading, a special heading perhaps? Think of emails. Does an email look the same as an essay or perhaps a diary or a journal? Does a journal look the same as a blog or a proposal? Think of that. After you choose a particular title or heading depending on your text type, think about the subheading or a byline. Do you have to include your name when you write your text type or not? Remember, some text types require you to include the name of the author under the title, that is the byline. Also, think of the format. It's really important for the conventions. Does your text type include bullet points or enumeration or sections? Some text types have this part as optional. Other text types, such as reports, have a mandatory section, right? So think of this when you have to choose your text type. Also, do not forget the internal organization. It's really important to get your message across. Every single text type has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. However, how this introduction and body and conclusion look is going to depending of course on the conventions. And finally, think of the register, the tone, the address. For every single text type, of course, in your task, in your prompt, you're going to notice that there's a particular audience. Now, some text types have a very particular register that the IB considers as correct. So even though, for example, in real life, you send emails to your teachers or to the headmaster or to a doctor, for the IB, emails will always be informal, right, for the tests. So keep that in mind when you have to choose your text types. And for this, you will have to use your memory. You will have to memorize every single one of them. And that also includes the address, like who are you writing to? Should you talk in first person, second person, third person? And of course the tone, which should be serious or to entertain, which will be mandated by the purpose of your task. So now that we have all of these necessary requirements for our conventions, why don't we start studying all together all 16 text types. Okay, are you ready? Keep your pen ready, keep your highlighter ready. We're going to check all of the examples right now. So, when we have to look at the list, we will notice that in total there are 16 text types that we have studied all together. First we have the articles, then we have the blogs, brochures and leaflets, the diary entry, email and letters, and yeah, as you can see, we have a lot of types of text types, and it's really important that you notice that for every single text type, the format and the way they look and the purpose of each of them are absolutely different, right? So let's go to articles. Your article is going to be decided depending on your purpose, of course, and usually articles will be semi-formal. And it's important that you remember that the purpose of the article and the audience will be indicated always by your task. For example, your school magazine. So you have to write an article for a school magazine, depending, of course, on your task. And the purpose of this is always to inform or to report. You don't have to provide opinions in your article. The register, therefore, should be semi-formal towards formal, but always depending on your audience. And the tone, of course, should be suitably serious, also depending on your task. Now, in terms of the conventions, let's have a look at the example. So, in your case, there is a very clear headline, right? And for this article, keep this in mind. You need to provide a headline which basically catches the attention of your reader. provide a summarizing, which is these lines under the headline in which you explain in very short terms what you will tackle in your article. And after that, of course, the byline, which is the author. If you have read news articles in magazines or newspapers, you will notice that they also tend to include the date. And in your article, it's important to remember the internal organization. So look at this. You are providing an introduction, in this case, Cape Town, and then you go all the way down towards explaining a particular situation. And remember, it's an article. You don't have to convince anybody. Just provide enough context about a situation that you want to talk about, usually in regards to a local audience, right? So in this case, it's about waste. It's about landfill sites. Will they reach their capacity in 5 years? So make sure that you include quotations. Make sure you include other people's opinions. Of course, you can invent information, but make sure that your internal organization is very logical. It's very organized, and that you always call back to the task with a final conclusion, right? So keep all of this in mind for your articles. Now moving on to blogs, we have worked on this in class a lot. And remember, blogs are usually a digital type of entry. So the subject matter is going to depend on what the task requires you to do, but usually the purpose is to entertain or to talk about people who are interested in this topic. So of course the register is going to be semi-formal to informal. And the tone should be to entertain. It should be chatty because you are kind of talking to somebody on the internet, right? And the conventions are based on typical blog techniques. You need a catchy title. You need to maybe have bullet points or sections. It's always important to also try to have a basic format of introduction, body, conclusion, and in your last paragraph, you should try to entice people to comment, right? So let's look at this example. There's a very clear title in here, The Pleasures of Hating. And in your introduction, you start with an attention catcher, right? I enjoy hating. So whichever is the task, whichever is the topic you have to talk about, make sure that you have a logical organization of your ideas. Remember, you're talking to somebody on the internet about a particular topic that you're interested in. So as you can see, we have some bullet points, and there's a very clear introduction to the topic. There's a body in which you logically organize your ideas in regards to hating, the benefits, the pleasures of hating, and that also brings you all the way to the conclusion, in which you basically explain and summarize why hating is good for you sometimes, right? You shouldn't hate every day of your life, but you are enticing the reader to replying to you in a sense, right? Have a look at the couldn't we? So you can talk in first person, but you should also address somebody else, right? Because in the blog you are writing for other people. Remember, images are not really needed. So even though in blogs we have worked in class with making images, that is not a required format for the ID, just writing. The brochure and leaflets have the same issue in a sense. It's not about the images voice, but it's about the purpose, right? Which in this case is to get a situation or an object or a service known. So there will be a main heading. There will be use of multiple sections like bullet points, subheadings, background information, but perhaps the most important is not just the subheadings, but also the contact information. Do not forget, if you choose as an appropriate text type the brochure or the leaflet or the pamphlet, you have to provide at the end a bit of contact information. So in this example, we have a title, we have the introduction of this brand new object, which is the book, the Bio-Optic Organized Knowledge Device. And the title is catchy. There is a subheading. We do have some bit of sectioning in short paragraphs, but it would be better to have real sections, with subtitles and perhaps bullet points or numberings. And as you can probably notice, this example is missing one key component, right? We have some numberings here that could benefit your writing. Remember, the examiner is reading this, but there is no contact information. The contact information is missing. So please remember to add it in your text, because that will show the examiner that you clearly know the conventions of your text type, and that this isn't just an article or you suggesting people to buy or to use something, but rather to contact you to know more about this product, which in this case is a book, right? So brochures, pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that you are recommending something, right? In a diary or the journal, there are not too many differences, but this is a very particular text type because you will have a first person address. That means the audience will always be yourself, right? So it's going to be private, it's going to be for you, therefore the register is extremely informal or quite informal, right? There's no clear conclusion, there's no conventions for the conclusion of the diary. Just make sure that your diary is always addressed to yourself, and the paragraphing is lucid in the sense that there is a logical um, organization of your ideas, usually with a narration perhaps, but make sure that the sentences are clear, that you don't use too many idiomatic sentences, and be careful with the cliche beginning of Dear Diary. That is so cliche, but it does suggest to the examiner that it is, a diary. But there are so many other ways you can start with, and make sure that your conclusion is clear in the sense that yes, you are ending your ideas, but there is no particular or usual way to start or end a diary. Just make sure that you complete the task, which is perhaps narrating your day or talking about an experience you had, but make sure you follow that during your text. The emails or letters is a very particular case, just like I explained at the beginning. It's going to depend according to the IB. So for the IB, emails and letters are the same text type. Of course, they're going to look different, but they are both informal for the IB. So keep that in mind. You are not using this to write to your teachers or to the headmaster, but always to somebody on your same level of authority, right? Like a peer or your family or a friend abroad, but that's important. So always remember that you are talking to a very specific person. It's not a big audience, one person, and there are opening and closing salutations, right? In the basic format, there's a specific heading which is going to be given by whether it's a letter or an email. So as you can see, the letter, it does have the date, the address of the person, and it looks like letter, like a physical letter, right? You open with the opening salutations, dear Maya, and you start by thanking them for writing to you if that's the case for your task. There's a clear organization of ideas. Make sure you tackle everything that your task is requiring you to do. And of course, there will be closing salutations. Hope to see you soon. And you end with your signature, your name. If it's an email, you're going to have the to and the email of the person who you're copying this email to, if there's somebody else, usually no, and the subject, which is the reason to why you are writing this person. Start with the greeting, opening salutations, your paragraphs in which you tackle, and of course the closing and the signature, just like the letter. The essay is a special case. Essays will usually be the appropriate text type when you have to convince your audience on a particular topic or to explore a topic. These are extremely formal, semi-formal depending on the topic or the audience, but usually formal. And you need to include a title, you need to include arguments that are logical and organized. And of course, it's going to have an instinct introduction and conclusion. Yes. So make sure you use this when you have to look at a subject in an objective way. That means no opinions, right? But thoughtful ideas. The basic format, as you will be seeing very soon, there is a title, an introduction in which you provide a thesis, perhaps, the body in which you explore the arguments, and of course a conclusion. So there's going to be a title. This is just, of course, the sample. Your introduction, just make sure you tackle the particular topic. In this case, it is unfair to measure success at year 11 through a series of exams in each subject. So you are starting with your topic sentence or your thesis in which you provide an idea that you will explore throughout your essay, right? And then there's the follow-up of the arguments in which you explore this idea, why it's unfair to measure success for this particular year. Do not forget the connectors. Connectors are the most important for the essay because they will show the examiner the logical sequence of your ideas, right? And of course, do not forget that you do not need to add the handles of conclusion or body or introduction. This is just to show you how you should separate your paragraphs, right? So remember, in your conclusion, you call back to your introduction, you summarize everything you explored in your essay, and you end with a type of persuasion, right? Or a possible solution or future ideas that you would like to explore. Going to be, an oral interview by itself, but rather your accounts of a conversation you had with somebody important, like a musician or somebody else that is going to be published in one specific place, for example, a school magazine, right? So the register is going to be semi-formal to formal. Maybe show some tones of fascination towards the person, make sure it's interesting for the reader, and of course indicate some direct quotations. That means quote back to what this person said. There will be a headline, there will be some sub-headlines summarizing. A byline, you need to write down the author who wrote this interview, of course. Sections are optional, of course, and just make sure that your title is catchy. In this case, meeting JD. There we have the byline, Derry Morgan, who is our writer. And it's really important that you, in your introduction of your interview, you give some accounts or a summary or an overview of the person or the subject you are interviewing, right? Like, where do they come from? Why are you talking to them? The reason to how you met them and why you are interviewing them. Throughout your body, make sure that you quote back to why you are talking to this person, and of course provide quotations. What did this person say? In this case, this is an artificial intelligence, a robot, so of course you are quoting a robot for this particular example, but just make sure that you tackle the task. And as a conclusion, just make sure that you give some ideas or opinions into why you talk to this person, what ideas they gave you during the conversation, and just make sure you comply with what the task is asking you to do. Now, the news report is very particular, right? A news report is going to be given when you need to talk about a situation that happened, right? In a logical and objective way. So it's going to be semi-formal to formal, and it's going to be non-personal, right? So it's very neutral, a neutral style. There can be some embellishments, but it's usually better to maintain yourself neutral because you are retelling something that happened, right? So let's look at this particular example. We have the title. We have some summarizing in which we explain what we tackled during the news report, the byline, the author, and a quick introduction in which we talk about the situation at hand, and then provide some details about this particular situation, which is about giving rights to robots, and of course end with a conclusion into what the future holds for this particular situation. Now, of course, news reports are going to be in newspapers. Keep that in mind, whether it's digital or physical. You are always addressing a general public, right? So usually that will be your audience, depending on, of course, what the task asks. So make sure you comply with what the task is asking you to do. The opinion column and the letter to the editor are very particular in the sense that in both you are using first person, you are talking about your opinions, but the difference is going to be the address. The opinion column is meant for you to talk about, well, let's talk first about the letter to the editor. Yeah, you're talking specifically towards the editor of a newspaper. So usually you're going to call back to something that was written before in the newspaper. And of course, it looks like a letter. There's an opening salutation and there's a closing salutation. And throughout your paragraphs, you just tackle what was discussed before in a different, perhaps, article from this editor and why your ideas are important, right? But in the opinion column, it's a bit different. You talk about one particular topic. You provide a byline, which is, of course, your name, and you give your opinion towards one particular topic, which the task, of course, is going to tell you. So there's no opening salutations. It looks like a news report on an article, but it's not objective. It's the opposite. It's subjective. So in this case, it's about the IB program that should be embraced. Of course, there's a conclusion, which is your opinion and should be enticing and persuasive. Now, the personal statement and the cover letter, both of them will have as an audience somebody in an important position. Usually, you will have to write it in a very formal way. There will be a title, there will be some headings that are necessary, and the personal statement itself, it's about showing yourself, right? In this case, this example is a nursing personal statement in which somebody who wants to enter the nursing program, in this one you don't need the title, you talk about yourself, like the reasons into why you want to enter this program, the experience that you had, and what you can bring to this program, why it's important for you to enter this particular course. So personal statements are usually to enter a course or to apply for a job, right? You use this for university as well, or for certain programs like professional programs that you want to participate in. Just make sure that you comply with the task as always, right? And now in the case of the cover letter, that will be specifically to apply for a job or a college. Just like we practice in class, it's going to be very formal, consistently formal. And as we can see, this it looks very similar to what we practice in class. Over there, you're going to have your number or your email, your name. Then you have the information about the person you are writing to, or the school you're writing to, or the job you're writing to, opening salutations, the introduction in which you state the reason you want to apply, your body, which is your experience, what you can bring to this place, and as a closing, you call back to your resume, and of course, closing salutations, and you thank them for their time with your name. The proposal is very particular. The proposal you will have to do when you need to provide solutions, right? So you have a situation in which you want to provide a solution, or you want to propose, as the name implies, how a particular situation can be improved, right? So pay attention to who your audience will be. It's going to be particularly formal, usually. And let's look at the conventions with the examples. So we have a title, right, which summarizes what you're going to tackle. You have, as you can see, very clear sections with numberings, with bullet points. So make sure that your sections are clearly organized. There is a very specific introduction in which you give context into why you are proposing a solution or proposing, in this case, activities. And then you have a logical sequence into these particular activities with great detail, right? Don't forget your bullet points, and of course a conclusion in which you call back to your introduction, and in which you state that you hope your proposal can be considered. The report looks very similar to a proposal, but the purpose is absolutely different. In the proposal, you give solutions. In the report, you only, as the name implies, report. You only talk about something that happened, but in a very formal and organized way. It's a retelling of a situation. So it's going to be a formal register, once again, impersonally authoritative. And also make sure that it does follow the conventions in terms of the format, right? So once again, it looks really similar to a proposal. You can also have numberings, you can have bullet points, you can have sections, but a title is needed. You need to provide an introduction in which you summarize the situation at hand and then basically explain, right? Like logically sequence the situation at hand or a particular topic that you are required to report. Of course, there's going to be a conclusion which call back to the introduction and basically talk about the discoveries of this report and why it will be useful, right? But of course, very objective, you're not providing solutions. A review, on the other hand, is extremely subjective, right? You are required to give your opinions on one very specific thing or event or object like movie or film or music. So make sure that you follow the basic format, right? There's a headline that basically summarizes in a catchy way what you tackle. There will be a byline with the name of the author. Some summarizing is optional, and of course, in the introduction, you provide some context into how you got to this place or this movie or anything which is you're reviewing. In your body, you tackle some details. And in your conclusion, it's always good to call back to the experience that you had and whether you would recommend it or not, whether it's negative or positive will be given by the task, and whether you will go back to see it or go back to experience it or not. Yes. So very clear. I think you've practiced this a lot. So let's move on to set of instructions or guidelines, right? Now, the set of instructions or guidelines are required to have sections, right? It's mandatory for you to have numberings or a step-by-step progress, right? So make sure that your register is semi-formal. It's very direct because you are commanding somebody to do something. And of course, it's going to have a title, a sequence of events that they need to follow, headings, short paragraphs, and very, very direct, right? Now, introduction is needed just to provide some context into why this person that you are writing to or these people that you are writing to need these guidelines for you. So in this case, this example is about planning a gap year. There's your title. And in your introduction, you explain why it's important to plan this gap year in this case. And as you can see, we have some very clear numberings, but this is missing the conclusion, in which you invite whoever is reading this set of guidelines to experience these guidelines by themselves and hopefully talk back to you and whether it helped them or not to tell you, right? So make sure that you have introduction, body, and conclusion for every single text type, okay? So very clear sections, just command somebody to do something in a logical way. Social media posting or online forums haven't appeared just yet on any official IB exam. However, the IB requires you to know this. It's going to be semi-formal to informal. And of course, it's a digital medium. So it's a direct address. You're talking to somebody on the internet, just like the blog. And titles are not needed. But it's always good to talk in first person about a particular situation, depending on what the task wants you to do. You can use some markers to show that you are in a digital space, like today at 10 p.m. or your name, like a byline. But you don't have to add, emojis or any other special format. This particular text type is very free. You don't need to add any comments or share buttons or any of that. Just talk about the topic at hand. Yeah. And finally, the oral text type, which is a speech or debate or presentation. I say oral because these are meant to be read aloud. So keep that in mind. It's going to be semi-formal to informal, but these are usually addressed to a large public, a local public. Yes. So when you are meant to speak to your local council or your neighborhood or your school, you will have to use this particular text type in which you address them at the beginning. During your body, you basically explain what you're talking about. A title is not needed. Just make sure that when the examiner reads your text, they can clearly see that it's a speech meant to be read aloud. So as you can see, there's a direct address. You see when a tragedy like this strikes. It's important for us. So you are calling them to behave in a certain way. We must examine, and of course, a conclusion. But what we can't do is to use this tragedy, right? So make sure that you use a lot of we, us, and talk to your audience in a logically organized way. Yes. So with the closing, make sure that it's powerful, make sure that it's engaging, and make sure that you kind of ask them to behave in a certain way or provide some type of solution. And that would be the end for our flash review. Make sure you study, make sure you use all of the tools available for you in the aula virtual, and I wish you the best of luck, boys. Goodbye.